April 28, 2002 began as an ordinary spring day in southern Maryland, until, without warning, the atmosphere conspired to produce the most violent tornado the Mid-Atlantic had seen in generations. By nightfall, homes and history in La Plata vanished beneath winds of more than 200 miles per hour. This would become the deadliest and most destructive tornado in Maryland's recorded history, leaving a town shredded and a state stunned. But why did a catastrophe of this scale strike a place so unprepared, and what unseen chain of events made devastation inevitable? The answer lies not just in the destruction, but in the science, and the warning signs almost everyone missed. High above the East Coast on April 28, 2002, two powerful jet streams swept across the continent. One raced eastward over the Ohio Valley at more than 110 miles per hour, while another streaked over New England at nearly 90 miles per hour. Where these rivers of wind overlapped, the atmosphere churned with invisible energy, primed for rapid upward motion. Far below, a cold front pressed in from the west, trailing a line of unsettled weather from the Appalachians toward the Atlantic. On the ground, southern Maryland saw clearing skies by midday, sunlight pouring down to warm the land and drive temperatures into the 70s. That warmth, combined with a surge of humid air from the Gulf of Mexico, quietly transformed the air mass over Charles County. Dew points climbed into the mid-60s, a rare level of moisture for this region in April. Meteorologists tracking the setup noted the unusual alignment, the coupled jets aloft, the surface front, and the deepening well of warm, moist air. This combination is more common in the heart of Tornado Alley than east of the Blue Ridge. Yet on this day, the ingredients gathered over Maryland, setting the stage for explosive thunderstorm growth. The birthplace of the storm would be traced back to the border of Kentucky and West Virginia, where a supercell began to organize in the early afternoon. Driven by powerful winds above, the storm raced east at highway speeds, crossing mountains that usually sap the strength from severe weather. But the upper-level support was relentless. As the cold front advanced, it forced the humid air skyward, fueling towering clouds and violent updrafts. The lower atmosphere, now loaded with energy and spinning winds, became a breeding ground for rotation. By late afternoon, the converging forces had transformed a typical spring day into a powder keg. The regional weather pattern, shaped by distant jet streams and a shifting front, would soon focus its energy on a narrow corridor stretching from the Potomac River to the Chesapeake Bay. In the hours ahead, the consequences of these large-scale drivers would come crashing down on La Plata with a fury few could have imagined. Instability built over southern Maryland through the afternoon, growing more intense with every passing hour. The air above Charles County was now loaded with energy rarely seen so close to the Atlantic. Meteorologists measured convective available potential energy, CAPE, approaching 1,900 joules per kilogram, a figure more typical of Oklahoma than the mid-Atlantic in April. This meant the atmosphere was primed for explosive upward motion, ready to turn any spark into a towering storm. But it was not just the heat and humidity. Winds in the lowest few thousand feet of the atmosphere screamed in from the south at over 50 miles per hour, while the surface winds remained light and variable. This sharp difference in wind speed and direction with height, what meteorologists call vertical wind shear, created a spinning environment perfect for supercells. In Maryland, these conditions almost never align. On April 28th, they did, and they did so over one of the most densely populated corridors in the region. Forecasters at the National Weather Service watched their models and radar screens with growing concern. The numbers were off the charts for this part of the country. Extreme instability, strong vertical shear, and a surge of Gulf moisture had all converged east of the Appalachians. The cold front pressing in from the west forced the saturated air upward, feeding the supercell as it roared out of West Virginia. The storm's forward speed, nearly a mile per minute, meant there was little time for local agencies to respond if things went wrong. Events like this are almost unheard of along the Atlantic seaboard. NOAA records show that tornadoes of F4 intensity are extremely rare here. Only a handful have ever been documented between the Blue Ridge and the ocean. Yet on this evening, the atmospheric ingredients that usually stay separated came together over southern Maryland. The result was a mesoscale powder keg, with all the fuel and rotation necessary for a violent tornado. For meteorologists, the setup was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. The radar signatures would soon demand split-second decisions, and the fate of entire communities would hang on what happened next. At 6:10 p.m. on April 28, 2002, a forecaster at the National Weather Service office in Sterling, Virginia, picked up the phone and called the Charles County 911 Center. The message was clear but cautious: a tornadic thunderstorm approaching from the west, and conditions were unusually dangerous for southern Maryland. This was not a routine heads-up. The meteorologist on duty had been watching radar signatures and model data all afternoon, noting the rare combination of instability and wind shear building over the region. Still, the storm's behavior was unpredictable, and the radar images were not showing a classic tornado signature at that moment. Inside the Charles County Emergency Operations Center, the call triggered a round of quiet urgency. Operators began monitoring their radios and phone lines more closely, knowing that severe weather could escalate quickly. Yet, without a formal tornado warning, protocol stopped short of activating sirens or broadcasting urgent alerts. The atmosphere in the room was tense, a mix of vigilance and uncertainty. No one wanted to overreact, but no one wanted to be caught off guard either. By 6:45 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Charles and Calvert counties. The bulletin included a pointed reminder that tornadoes were possible. This language was stronger than usual, but it still fell short of the highest level of alarm. The decision was shaped by what the radar showed at the time, a supercell that appeared to be weakening as it neared the Potomac River, with its telltale hook echo fading from the screen. Forecasters hesitated, weighing the risk of false alarms against the danger of missing a real threat. In those final minutes before touchdown, the clock ticked forward. Dispatchers fielded routine calls and weather updates, unaware that just 10 miles west, the storm was reorganizing. The early alert had bought a sliver of time, but the uncertainty left officials caught between caution and action. As the supercell crossed the river, the situation would change in ways no one in the operations center could fully anticipate. At 6:56 p.m., the tornado touched down just south of Marbury. In the Charles County Emergency Center, dispatchers faced a sudden surge of calls, reports of trees down, roofs torn away, and power lines snapping. The phone system, already strained by routine evening volume, jammed under the weight of frantic voices from the storm's first victims. As the tornado cut a path east toward La Plata, each second brought more chaos. Operators tried to relay information to field crews and coordinate with the National Weather Service, but calls stacked up faster than anyone could answer. The National Weather Service, monitoring radar signatures from Sterling, Virginia, saw the unmistakable signs of a tornado on the ground. Forecasters attempted to reach county officials to warn them of the confirmed threat. But the lines were clogged, emergency calls flooded the system, and critical messages were left stranded in the queue. The warning chain, designed to move life-saving information in minutes, now slowed to a crawl. At the same time, the emergency alert system faltered. More than half the radio stations in the region, 53%, failed to receive or retransmit the tornado warning. Outages and technical problems silenced the airwaves just as the need for communication peaked. In homes across Charles County, televisions flickered with static or scrolled old weather updates. Many residents never heard the urgent message at all. Outside darkness pressed in. The sun had dropped low and the thick canopy of spring leaves blocked what little light remained. For those in the tornado's path, there was no view of the approaching danger, just a sudden roar and the rattle of windows. With warning systems crippled and the storm moving at nearly a mile a minute, precious time slipped away. Dispatchers, working by the glow of computer screens, struggled to keep up as the tornado closed in on La Plata, leaving a trail of destruction in the gathering night. Roaring into La Plata just after 7 p.m., the tornado unleashed its full fury on the heart of town. At its widest, the vortex stretched half a mile across, swallowing entire blocks in seconds. Winds exceeded 260 miles per hour, strong enough to rip brick buildings from their foundations and twist steel beams like wire. Downtown landmarks that had stood for generations vanished almost instantly. The 125-foot city water tower, a fixture above the skyline, toppled to the ground, sending thousands of gallons rushing through the streets and flooding nearby homes. Businesses along Route 301 were shredded to their frames. Posey's Market, a local staple, was reduced to a pile of bricks and shattered glass, with only a few interior walls left standing. The destruction did not follow a neat path. Two separate vortices spun within the main tornado, one passing just south of downtown. Where their tracks converged, the damage was absolute. Structures flattened, vehicles tossed, and entire rows of trees snapped or stripped bare. The main fire station and several churches lost their roofs and upper floors. Historic homes were swept away, leaving only bare slabs behind. Debris filled the air, driven by winds that rivaled the strongest hurricanes ever recorded in the state. First responders rushed into the chaos, navigating streets blocked by fallen power lines, mangled vehicles, and splintered lumber. With communications down and darkness closing in, they searched for survivors in the wreckage, calling out over the howl of wind and distant alarms. The scale of destruction in La Plata was unlike anything Maryland had ever seen. A downtown erased in minutes and a community forever changed. By the time the tornado left La Plata behind, the toll on human life was undeniable. 3 people died as a direct result of the storm. Each loss was tied not just to the violence of the winds, but to the frailty of the structures meant to protect them. On Hawkins Gate Road, a 51-year-old man was killed when the house he was building collapsed around him. The structure was still under construction. Its walls and roof were not yet fully anchored. His wife survived, but with critical injuries that would linger long after the skies cleared. In Calvert County, the tornado crossed the Patuxent River and found a small home with no foundation. It lifted the building, carrying it nearly 80 feet before slamming it into a culvert. Inbide George and Margaret Alvey, aged 68 and 65, lost their lives. The house's lack of anchoring turned it into a death trap, a fact later cited by weather experts as a warning about construction standards in tornado-prone areas. Across Charles and Calvert counties, more than 120 people were injured. Some were hurt by flying debris, others trapped beneath collapsed roofs or pinned by shattered walls. In La Plata, a homeowner described digging out from the rubble with bare hands, calling out for neighbors in the dark. A volunteer firefighter, first on the scene, recalled the silence that hung over the ruins, broken only by distant cries for help. For many, survival came down to a single decision: where they took shelter, how quickly they moved, or the simple luck of being out of harm's way. These stories of loss, of endurance, of rescue became the foundation for what came next. A community determined to rebuild and to make sure the lessons of that night would not be forgotten. Reconstruction began almost as soon as the debris was cleared. In the months following the storm, federal and state aid arrived in La Plata, helping cover the staggering $115 million in damages. Bulldozers and work crews filled the streets where homes and businesses once stood, clearing away what was left and laying the groundwork for a new downtown. Town officials, faced with the painful lessons of the tornado, pushed for stronger building codes. New structures had to meet stricter standards for wind resistance, anchored foundations, reinforced walls, and roofs designed to withstand storms far worse than anyone had imagined before. The cost of rebuilding was high, not just in money, but in the choices the community had to make. Some business owners struggled with the expense of meeting the new codes, while others saw them as a promise that La Plata would never be caught so unprepared again. Over time, the scars faded and new buildings rose, many bearing plaques or photos that quietly remembered the storm. Each spring, the town gathers for an annual memorial, honoring both the lives lost and the determination that rebuilt La Plata from the ground up. After the storm, the question on everyone's mind was simple: could this happen again? For years, tornadoes of this strength seemed unthinkable in Maryland, but La Plata's devastation erased any sense of immunity. In the aftermath, local leaders and emergency officials pressed for action. One of the first changes came with the expansion of outdoor warning sirens, systems that had been rare in the region before 2002. Charles County installed new sirens across vulnerable areas, determined to give residents more than just a fleeting chance to seek shelter. The push did not stop there. The National Weather Service, shaken by the communication breakdowns and the speed of the tornado, overhauled its training for radar operators. Forecasters learned to recognize less typical tornado signatures, especially in places not known for violent storms. NOAA weather radios became a fixture in homes and schools, promoted as a direct line to urgent warnings, no matter the time of day or night. The message from officials was clear: severe weather can strike anywhere, and preparation cannot be left to chance. Today, La Plata stands as a reminder that readiness is not just for the Midwest. It is for every community that believes it could never happen here. Today, tornadoes strike outside the traditional tornado alley with increasing frequency. Maryland's hardest lesson endures. Violent storms can erase a town in minutes, but preparedness shapes survival. As climate extremes intensify, every community faces the same question: how ready are we when the sirens sound? The cost of complacency is written in La Plata's rebuilt streets. Stay vigilant, because nature will not offer a second warning.